This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting, David Muir.
Good afternoon, and we're coming on the air with breaking news at this hour. Just moments ago, President Trump tweeted that White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders will be stepping down at the end of the month to return home to Arkansas. The president calling her, quote, a very special person, praising her for doing an incredible job. Senior-level administration sources telling ABC News that Sanders gathered members of her staff late this afternoon to inform them of her departure. It's been 94 days since Sanders last held a formal White House press briefing Monday, March 11th. President Trump has not named a successor. We do want to bring in our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, because, John, Sarah Sanders has been with this president for a very long time, given the track record of many of his other top-level staffers. And, in fact, she was the second press secretary for this president.
She took over when Sean Spicer abruptly resigned last July of 2017. She has been with the president from the start. She was there during the campaign. And although she had effectively stopped doing briefings, you mentioned more than 3 months since the last White House briefing, she had become an incredibly important and close advisor to the president. David, she is one of, I believe, only 3 White House staffers who accompanied him on each and every one of his trips abroad. And in many of those recent trips, she was part of the president's tight delegation in meetings with foreign leaders. Even during those 2 summit meetings with Kim Jong-un, Sarah Sanders, the press secretary, was sitting there at the table with the president. That is something I have covered a dozen different press secretaries, 4 different presidents. I have never seen a press secretary play a role that prominent, that close to the president. So although the public has seen much less of her in recent months, really over the past year, she has been one of the president's absolute closest and most important advisors.
As John Karl points out, there in many ways, Sarah Sanders has taken on a much larger role than the typical role of the press secretary at the White House, just traveling with the president on his overseas trip. In fact, part of that royal welcome by the Queen in the UK. I'm joined now by Cecilia Vega, who also covers the White House for us. And Cecilia, you and I have talked about the role that Sarah Sanders has had from the very start, which has been sort of atypical from what we've seen in the White House in previous administrations. She's been right at the president's side. She's been in the Situation Room, and she's been with him on foreign trips.
Yeah, I think back to these images we've seen that come out of the White House, David, of Sarah Sanders right there in the Situation Room with the president, helping him make decisions and inform decisions right alongside him. But let's also remember back to those days when Sarah Sanders did, in fact, used to brief the press. Those were very contentious press briefings often, and she sparred regularly with a number of reporters in that room. And she is leaving, I think many would say, with her credibility in question right now, David, because the Mueller report, which just came out at the end of April, revealed that Sarah Sanders had acknowledged that her repeated claim in 2017 that she had personally communicated with countless FBI agents who told her they were unhappy with the president. She ended up saying that that was a slip of the tongue, and she admitted that it was not true, that she had been speaking falsehoods at that podium. And you know, that is a position where she is speaking on behalf of the White House to the American people. So I think there are big questions about her credibility right now. We don't know the reason why she's leaving. We have no idea if it was doubtful, connected to the Mueller report at all. But she is certainly out, and she's someone who rose through the ranks of the campaign. And it's worth saying that there are very few people left in the president's inner circle who were there for that long.
As you rightly point out, Cecilia, Robert Mueller did take aim at Sarah Sanders in his very lengthy report after 2 years of investigating. And in fact, his report said that Sanders told this office that her reference to hearing from those countless members of the FBI was a, quote, slip of the tongue when she talked about there being a lack of confidence at the FBI for James Comey. I do want to get back to Jonathan Karl, who's at the White House, in addition to Cecilia Vega, who's with us on the air. And John, of course, this comes one day after our exclusive access to President Trump, not only at the White House there, but traveling with him on the campaign trail.
Absolutely. This was an interview that Sarah Sanders was very much involved in setting up. 2 days worth of access with George Stephanopoulos. There's no suggestion that there's a connection here, but that was a hugely news-making interview and also in some circles a very controversial interview. I should also say, David, that I've had many conversations with Sarah Sanders really over the past year, where she has talked about the pressures of this job, the pressures on her family. She has 3 young children, all under the age of 10, and she had considered at various times leaving over the past year. So although this does come as there was no warning for this specific move, it comes a little bit out of the blue. As you said, comes right after the big ABC News interview, but it is something that in a larger sense is not all that surprising. This is a job that had taken a very big toll on Sanders and on her family.
And John Karl, no surprise to you, in this divided country, people feel very strongly on both sides about Sarah Sanders, a very long-serving press secretary for President Trump. Many of her supporters saying that she stood up for the president, talked about his record as he now campaigns for a second term. Her detractors will say there are questions about whether or not she was truthful along the way, given the Mueller report, which called into question her words in particular about the FBI, the culture there, and what FBI agents thought of James Comey. We'll have much more on the surprise departure of Sarah Sanders at the White House, a long-serving press secretary, and as we pointed out right here, she took on many other roles along with that role as press secretary. More of our live coverage on ABC News Live, our digital channel, abcnews.com, and of course, World News Tonight. I'll see you a short time from now. Good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.